Yo, what is up? Scott Barrett here on the School of Scott podcast. We are talking to Greg Brainos, creator of the Coach Speak Index. What are we doing? We watched every day two post draft press conference. We're here to give you the highlights, the key takeaways. We're recording this during round 7 of the NFL draft. I had a baby's first birthday party today. I didn't even know the baby. Sucked. They didn't have the TV on. I was the only one doing 18 shots by myself, hammered, no strippers, not a good time. But my Giants got Cam Scatabo. We'll talk about that tomorrow or the next day. We're here to talk day 2 draft. Greg, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Day 2.
Bro, you didn't get this invite to the baby's birthday party?
Well, any baby's birthday party that doesn't have strippers there, like I want no part of that.
I know. It's like you guys need strippers. Like I can call them.
Okay.
I'll get cinnamon and jasmine and honey.
Let's go.
We need that for the cocktails anyway. Anyway, all right. Let's talk. Yeah, I'm still a little tilted over this. Let's talk day 2 of the NFL draft. We're gonna go in order, but some teams took multiple fantasy relevant guys. So we'll start with the Texans, who took the first offensive player off the board in Jaden Higgins, and then they took the next round 3. They took Jalen Noel. So both Iowa State wide receivers. They also have Xavier Hutchinson on this team who went to Iowa State. What are your notes, takeaways from this? Did you get anything good? I never do, because Nick Caserio is sort of like if you had a robot and you had like AI was fed a million Bill Belichick pressers. But I didn't. What did you think?
I mean, there's nothing came out of this presser as far as
never does
crucial notes that I could put into the Coach Speak Index Discord. But there was a really funny moment when a reporter kind of challenged Caserio on why'd you draft receiver, and Caserio got very defensive and
a great way to put it.
Defensive. Yeah. Very defensive, shot back at him. He was at the reporter. He's like, he was the top guy on our board. Okay. Like, we're never going to draft for need. Like, how many times do I have to say it? We're never going to draft for need. We're taking the top guy on our board.
Well, and then he said, what does it even mean to draft for need? Can someone tell me what it means? I don't know. How do you not know it? Like, I wish someone pushed him back. It's because you have the worst offensive line in football, Nick.
Mm-hmm.
So that drove me crazy. You know exactly what it means to draft for need.
It's funny how some of these GMs get amnesia during draft season. It's like, do you not remember what led to your season ending? What led to your promising young quarterback taking, a step back in year 2?
Yeah. And you have this from other GMs too, where it's like, who take a running back early. It's like, oh, is running back a devalued position? I don't get that. Maybe you could explain it to me. But like, you have other GMs who are like really smart about it, where I think it was the Lions GM who is just like, listen, like, you guys want me to take an edge rusher. I can take an edge rusher who stinks, or I could take this really good player that we got at a different position. So
Brad Mills is awesome.
Yeah, Nick. Anyway, we can move on from this. Not too much to take away. Next one is good. Browns, round 2, pick 36. They take Quinshon Judkins. Not one of my guys, but a great landing spot. They took round 3 Harold Fannin, sort of one of my guys. And late round 3, they took quarterback Dylan Gabriel. Let's just stick to like the most important takeaways. I don't think there's too much on Dylan Gabriel, but what stood out most to you?
They were gushing over Quinshon Judkins. They used the word bell cow several times in this press conference, and there were quotes that I was like, this someone has to have tweeted this out already. This quote has to be out there. I didn't see any of this Stefanski quote on Quinshon Judkins. But first, Andrew Berry says, we think he can be a bell cow runner that can really carry the load for us. And
underline that. That's huge.
Yeah. Stefanski said, whether we hand it to him or throw it to him, we want to use him in a bunch of different ways.
Yeah, that's noteworthy because before Nick Chubb got hurt, they kept talking him up as like really featured as a pass catcher, even though we never saw that. We did see that in like the one game he played until he got hurt. So he doesn't. Judkins doesn't have that profile. Not a lot of production in college as a pass catcher, but that's encouraging. And like I said, this is not a player I liked. They took Dylan Sampson day 3, who was also not a running back I was high on, although that's good value. Jacob Sanderson tweeted out, they took the better running back later. I don't know about that. I wouldn't go that far, but yeah, again, not a player I love, but this landing spot is elite. And you have Andrew Berry here saying all the right things. He said literal bell cow. He can really carry the load for us, volume back. It's everything you want to hear, and a great landing spot. So definitely a guy shooting up my board.
And on that Nick Chubb point, Barry actually referred to that in a couple different ways. He said, when Nick Chubb came into the league, no one thought he would ever be able to play on third downs. He wasn't a third down back, but you develop that with a player. And we felt like Nick Chubb got to the point where he could play on third downs. And Barry said that we've been spoiled the past couple of years with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. We feel like Quinshon is very much in that mold in terms of skill set. So this seems like a guy that they could just immediately plug in as RB1.
Yeah. Harold Fannin is one of my guys. Not surprising he went to the Browns. I've watched so many of their pressers. I know Andrew Berry. Well, the Browns have more analytics personnel in their front office than any other team. They've talked about athleticism being overrated. I've written so many words about that where I agree with that, except at the tight end position. But they where production doesn't matter as much, but you have like the tight end coming off of the most productive season ever, at least if you don't adjust for strength of schedule, which is also Harrison Bryant, like another guy they took. And so the quotes, you have David Njoku, free agent next year, no guaranteed money. The presser kind of left a little bit of a sour taste in my mouth. On the phone, Tommy Reese, the OC, said, "Hey, you're going to be a weapon for us." And then in the presser, they said he's really kind of the queen on the chessboard for us. Later on, said he's a mismatch piece for us. You can move him, use him in all these different ways. He did say underrated as a blocker, or like thought that was a lazy narrative. So that's encouraging. But the concern with some of these tight ends is they're a positionless player in like the worst way possible. And that was my concern. I also, I comped him to like a very rich man's Isaiah Likely. I think that kind of fits. And like this echoes what we heard after the Ravens took Likely. But what was your read on it?
Yeah, like you said, and this phrase kept coming up about Harold Fannin Jr., where with Quinshon Judkins, they kept saying bell cow. With Harold Fannin Jr., they kept saying this queen on the chessboard. Stefanski talked about it. Andrew Berry talked about it. Andrew Berry said, quote, he fits perfectly in terms of what Kevin and Tommy want to do philosophically on the offense, and obviously referring to Stefanski and Tommy Reese, the OC. So it sounds like they want to do a lot of 11 personnel with Njoku and Harold Fannin Jr.
Well, the big concern was like teams viewed him as a fullback, as like a Kyle Juszczyk, and he like worked out as a fullback at the Senior Bowl, which like obviously would suck for fantasy, but like the value from an NFL perspective is he's like a total mismatch piece, but he also creates tells where like based on how defenses are covering them, what they're going to play, and it like opens other guys up and what have you. And so those were just some concerns. I think ultimately, too much is up in the air to take too much away from this presser, but would have preferred to hear like, oh, he's, Njoku's gone next year and he's our guy, but you're never going to hear that anyway. Anything on the quarterback? I know they took Shedeur Sanders the next day.
Yeah, they said you don't usually hear GMs or coaches talking about the negatives that come with the guy that they just drafted. Andrew Berry said that the biggest negative you could say about Dylan Gabriel is he doesn't have ideal height. but that's not something that we saw reflected in his game or in his film.
Yeah. Undersized,
Good fit for a
5'11", 201. Yeah, interesting. He went above Shador, but then they took Shador the next day. If you watched the live reaction, it kind of seems like maybe the owner kind of forced them into that. But yeah. Next up, Patriots. They took Travion Henderson in round 2. They also took film darling Kyle Williams round 3. What were your notes on this one?
Elliot Wolf kept talking. Well, not kept talking about, but there are 3 players here that he was talking about. The 2 draft picks that you just mentioned, and then another player on their team. I can't remember who it was, but it was so funny. Everyone, he was like, "Yeah, he's undersized, but yeah, this guy's undersized, but." But yeah, it
was Jared Wilson, the center from Georgia.
Okay, gotcha. Wolf said that they got offers from teams to trade up into that spot, but like they just didn't want to move off Travion Henderson. So that's pretty good. What really popped to me was Elliot Wolf said we view him as a 3-down back and just a really good compliment.
Right. So you saw on Twitter like that go viral. It's like Elliot Wolf views him as a 3-down back, but like the literal next sentence was, and just a really good compliment.
Yeah, that's the big part to me. That makes it a little bit scary, and you just illustrated kind of what's wrong with social media and the fantasy football landscape is like, all right, what's the shortest headline that will get the most engagement, right? Like what'll really get people riled up or retweeting or whatever. But yeah, the context is king. Let's get the full quotes out there. Really good compliment. Don't love that. Did talk a lot about the home run ability that Travion Henderson has. Like, kept coming up. He would say, "Hey, he does this well. Also, he has a speed. He does this well. Also, he's really great on the outside and can hit a home run for you."
So he was asked again as a follow up. The reporter literally said, "You said you see Trey as a 3-down back?" ? And here's what he said, and this stood out to me because we have a lot of Fantasy Point subscribers watching this who read Brett's draft guide, and Brett was pretty hard on Travion Henderson, comped him to DeAndre Swift in the pejorative. Brett on Film versus Analytics on a number of shows has called him a wussy, questioning the toughness. So again, he was asked, "You said you see Trey as a 3-down back." Here's the direct quote. "He's a really good pass protector. He can run routes. He can catch the football, but he can also run inside. He's not a grinder between the tackles, power runner, but he has good vision. He hits the hole hard. He has good feet. And obviously he has the speed to run outside. We just feel he has that toughness and versatility." So they do not see Henderson the same way that Brett saw him. And again, I was more bullish based on the analytics, where I did see that DeAndre Swift comp, which is like not a bad downside comp, but I also saw a little bit of Dalvin Cook, a little bit of Devon Achane. This is also a player who like was a lock to go top 50 once he finished his freshman year. Then he got hurt. Then he got hurt again. And so, if he was like running to the sideline a little bit more than you would have liked, I think that's maybe a little forgivable. But yeah, first time asked about it, 3-down back, and just a really good combo. That's not great, but he dove in here and at least expanded and does like him as an inside runner, which was like a huge thing because when I dove into the analytics on outside runs, he had like the 4th best yards per carry ever. And like only ahead of him was like Dalvin, Etienne, Achane, right? And he's saying, no, we like him and we don't see the toughness concern. So that's a little encouraging.
Yeah, this seems like a little bit of a referendum on how they view Ramondre Henderson.
Ramondre Stevenson.
Ramondre Stevenson. Yeah, I mean they do, like Vrabel obviously doesn't love the fumbles. Like he's very familiar with the history of fumbles there. He's talked about it in pressers. They said, yeah, we're probably going to go get a running back in this draft. I mean, he'll definitely have a chance, Travion Henderson, to take over that position, I think. I,
Yeah,
I just, I
Brett and I were talking about this last night. How it was kind of weird. Where like Vrabel teams are known for being tough. Like they play above their weight. They're just a tough, hard nosed. You're going in for a battle, and then to take a guy who you know Brett questioned the toughness. But again, the GM didn't see it that way. I think we could skim through some of the ones coming up, but this is one I want to spend a great deal of time on. I think this is going to be the most important, the best action item on this, and that's Luther Burden. This is a player is not high on, and I'll just not to bury the lead. I'm doing an about face. Brett is not. Brett is doubling down. He's like, this isn't going to work out. I think I'm just wrong. I think in Dynasty at cost, I would want to be betting on Luther Burden over DJ Moore, over Romo Dunze at cost. And so it's not just the presser we watched last night. I'm going to go back to September of 2022. You and I talked about this a few times, Greg. I put a tweet out. I'm like, hey, when Ben Johnson is a head coach in 4 years, make a note of this. You want to be all in on Ben Johnson, slot wide receiver. So September of 2022, Amon-Ra St. Brown had only 2 career 100-yard games at this point. And here's a quote from this presser. I've always been in offenses that run through the slot. We drafted Jarvis Landry in Miami, and he led the league in reception his first 4 years in the NFL. It's a position I'm particularly fond of because you can be creative in a way you get them the ball that you can't with some of the other positions. And I just think it's really hard to eliminate a slot receiver from the game plan, from like a defensive coordinator's point of view. And then you posted a clip in April when he was asked about the slot. He was very non-committal on it being DJ Moore or Romo Dunze. And again, he said the same thing. He said, quote unquote, the slot was the focal point of the passing game where he's been in the past. And you have this guy, Romo Dunze, who slot wide receiver, slot only in college, clearly a need where he wasn't sure it would be DJ Moore or Romo Dunze working there. And this just couldn't be a better landing spot. You have this GOAT offensive play caller who, the offense runs through the slot. I had major separation concerns, but I don't have that if you have Ben Johnson just scheming him up. And so, yeah, I'm going to take the L here. And this is a player that's going to skyrocket up my rankings. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that and anything else you glean from this press conference.
I mean, just overall, really good landing spot for him. Like, seems crowded, but this will be a high-powered, efficient offense, run by a mastermind. Pretty decent draft capital here, and also the fact that they do have this really good offense and they're adding on top of it is bullish to me. And then if it wasn't for the kind of off-field concerns and work ethic stuff, I think Luther Burden goes a whole lot higher in this draft. So pretty good value there as well on that pick. As far as the presser is concerned, it was just Ryan Poles last night said that Luther Burden is an electric playmaker, highly competitive. His yak is special, probably the best in this class. So they obviously had their eyes on that. Like, that's one of his big things. What to me, I'm wondering if it's going to be like, will he be full-time slot? Will he be the main slot guy, or will he fulfill a kind of Jameson Williams role where he does play some slot, but not?
I mean, I see like a Debo
DJ Moore, maybe.
I see like full-time player spending like 90% of the time in the slot. Maybe he grows into like an Amon-Ra St. Brown, which is like a more well-rounded, but just take advantage of that yak ability, tons of PPR upside. I mean, we'll see though. Like Brett's, standing on business. He's just like, he's not that talented. Yeah, the film doesn't support it. And, I had plenty of concerns based on the analytics. He seems raw, struggled to separate on non-schemed targets, at least, for a slot wide receiver standard. But you brought up the character concerns, and like, sometimes I read way too deeply into this, but I watched them call Luther Burden and tell him he's going to be a Chicago Bear. And you did see all these guys excited, slapping each other on the back, like really excited to get this guy. But I thought it was funny, like the phone call, Ben Johnson was like, "Are you ready to go?" it's time now. It's time to go now. Hey, your coach told me what you're about. He said we're getting a dog. Is that what we're getting? Is that true? Please be true. Yeah, I know that's true. I know. It's just like it seemed like
It
the
felt
had some
like a
concerns
parole
all the
officer.
way up to the point of the call. Go.
It felt like a parole officer calling. Like, hey man, just checking in. Want to make sure everything's still good.
Keeping your nose clean.
Mm-hmm. Ben Johnson, I think it was his introductory press conference, and everybody was curious, like, oh, what kind of coach is he going to be? And he made it pretty apparent, like, this is going to be a real hard ass coach. And we've heard reports about him in practice of like how hard nosed he is, and how tough he is, how he really drives these guys. So he's not going to take any bullshit. That's for sure.
Maybe a short leash on Luther Burden then. Tyler Shuck, Mason Taylor. You have anything good on those guys? I didn't, for the most part. Derek dealing with his shoulder.
Yeah,
We'll navigate that. I have that.
Right. So New Orleans, Kellen Moore press conference said that
it was interesting. No GM. It was just the head coach, and he just riffed and he killed it. He had full, understanding of these players.
So there's a really funny moment in this presser. Kellen Moore got very uncomfortable when a reporter asked him if Tyler Shuck could compete for QB1 if Derek Carr was healthy. And Kellen Moore was just like, we're going to navigate the injury process.
Dude, he's so hard for me to rank in like super flex rookie drafts because like this dude's starting week 1.
Shuck?
I don't think he's good. Yeah, but
yeah,
I think he's starting week 1.
I think he is. It sounded like he started growing on Kellen Moore and the Saints more and more over the past few weeks or so in this draft process. And as far as what Kellen Moore said about him and traits and all that, and just said Shuck is ready to compete. Great rhythm and anticipation. He can hit all marks on the field from a throwing perspective. I think he has a great feel for the game. They really like his arm a lot.
What about Mason Taylor to the Jets? I watched that press conference. I didn't have any notes on it, but when I was watching the live draft, Nick Saban said the biggest recruiting mistake we ever made during his time at Alabama was not landing Mason Taylor, which is like a crazy statement. So Nick Saban, smart football mind, really high on the kid.
And do you remember Saban's quote last year? Oh, I do remember who it was now. It just kind of pinged off in my head of he told like Brian Dable, there's 2 guys I ever had problems scheming against in college, and it was Malik Neighbors and Brock Bowers.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Quote.
So maybe listen to Saban.
Yeah. No kidding.
Of that story. Aaron Glenn in this presser just said Mason Taylor's smart, ability to block and be a receiving threat really stood out on tape. He's going to come in and compete. I think he'll do a good job for us. I don't really expect Aaron Glenn to be the type of guy who just drools all over players and pressers. So like maybe this is the height of what's good coach speak from Aaron Glenn. We'll find out. But
that's a good point.
He talked about his Mason Taylor's versatility, and he also mentioned several times, so this is something that seems pretty important to Aaron Glenn, is Mason Taylor's bloodline. He kept talking about bloodline, right? And Aaron Glenn played in the NFL, had a brother who played in the NFL, so maybe this is a thing for him going forward.
Yeah, I always like want to poke fun at that, where like people, make fun of these like nepotism hires among the coaches, but it's like all the best coaches were nepotism hires. Bill Belichick, Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, the list goes on. And it's like maybe this is just like and this is what he kind of argued in the press conference, is like you learn directly from your father, and you're like spending nonstop time in football from when you're like Kyle Shanahan breaking down film when he's 6 years old, is like always in the locker rooms and like watching the film room with his dad. Or maybe it's like, being like a Renaissance painter where it's all, you have like Pliny the Elder and Pliny the Younger, or whatever it is, all these lineages.
Yeah.
What is it? Not a mentorship, apprenticeship,
Apprenticeship.
but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think that's what he even said. But yeah, I wasn't that high on Mason Taylor. And although he went above Terrence Ferguson and above Elijah Arroyo, I'm going to have him behind them, in part just because the pressers for these two tight ends were crazy. And we could start with Terrence Ferguson, who went 4 picks later to the Rams, 46th overall. Great notes here, but let's hear what you got.
First, before we get to Terrence Ferguson, little random nugget from this presser. The Rams hosted an event for first responders at their draft headquarters. 8 Rams players showed up as a part of this. You ready for the players? These are the 8 players. Matthew Stafford, Tyler Higbee, Puka Nacua, Kyron Williams, Blake Corum, Braden Fisk, Jared Verse, and Kobe Turner.
Wow.
Those are like...
They got all the best players.
They're top players, right?
Yeah.
They said these are our 8 top players who everyone would want to meet. Blake Corum's in there.
Oh, okay. That's where you go. I thought you were going like, yeah, they have like a great culture where like the stars are showing up, doing the extra work, and Blake Corum. Interesting. Well, they did just take a running back I love and a running back they're insanely high on, Jarquez Hunter, on day 3, but we can get to that in our next episode. That was a good aside, but I'll go with the top item from this. Sean McVay said, quote unquote, he reminds me of Chris Cooley, and he has some similar body mannerisms to Travis Kelce, which is, crazy. And, he kind of was like, listen, I know that's sacrilegious. I'm just saying, like, he reminded me a little bit of those guys. But he said he's a stud. We're very excited about him. And, it doesn't really get much better than that, is drawing Chris Cooley and Travis Kelce comps.
Yeah, he, like you said, he did follow it up saying those are big, lofty comparisons. So certainly not saying that he's those guys yet. McVay said that having Terrence Ferguson will allow them to be able to explore doing some different things. And if you look back at what Sean McVay said at his end of season presser in January, there's that clip that I posted about him saying that I would like this 2025 offense to be a little more versatile. And then he pointed to what Liam Cohen did in Jacksonville with all the different personnel groupings and how they're able to switch things up so seamlessly and keep this offense moving on the field. So when they're talking about Terrence Ferguson's versatility, and they're talking about, 12 personnel here, which last year Tyler Higbee didn't come back until the end of the season. So they didn't really have a tight end for, any part of the season last year, like a legit tight end. So maybe these are kind of the plans for the Rams this year, is to do some 12 personnel. It did sound more to me like this is, a developmental kind of pick. Like this is a player that might not play a lot this year, but like this will eventually be the guy. If you look at a lot of the top comps for Terrence Ferguson, like a lot of them were Tyler Higbee. Like a lot of people had Higbee as a comp. So yeah, McVay says he'll provide us the opportunity to have some different things come to life potentially, but we've got a lot of work to put in the meantime.
Yeah, I had the same read. Tyler Higbee, I know the team loves him, but he's 32 years old on the last year of his deal. Think they went out and got the tight end of their future, and this is a player Sean McVay loves, is very high on, and it's a great landing spot. Just like you always want to stay invested in a Sean McVay offense where he has this uncanny ability to just produce league-winning players, and these are league-winning players who typically are cheap in drafts, or we didn't see coming, or players like dramatically outperforming the draft capital that was invested in them. So very high on him, but I think I'm higher on Elijah Arroyo, who went 4 picks later, 50th overall to the Seahawks. Seahawks also took Jalen Milroe in the following round. But my God, the Seahawks were talking about Arroyo like he's a 20-year-old Kyle Pitts.
Oh yeah. John Schneider, the general manager, said Elijah Arroyo has a full route tree. He's super explosive. And then Mike McDonald, talking about Arroyo, also said he can run an extensive route tree. He can split out wide. He can do X receiver type things. He has a bigger body, provides a ton of value to us. And then he's going to go in there as an actual inline tight end and create some of those bigger personnel formations. That's the vision we have for him.
I think you're underselling it here. And John Schneider, one of the best guys to watch his press conferences, straight shooter, tells it like it is. If anything, he's a little too forthcoming with what he provides us. But yeah, he said some of our coaches were like, maybe he's an X receiver because like you said, he can run the full route tree. They talked about him splitting out wide, doing X stuff, doing actual inline stuff. And later on, a reporter asked, well, what about like the injuries he's had and all the time he missed? Here's the quote. Well, that's exactly why he was there when we were picking at 50. He has missed time, but if he hadn't missed the time, the talent, he's probably a top 15 type pick. So, this guy is special. This was Brett Whitefield's tight end 3 in the class. And I think that's where I'm going to rank him, tight end 3. Really bullish. Like, again, like this is like the things they're saying is like the things they said about Kyle Pitts, where it's just like freak, special. He could play X, like, and that's the dream from a fantasy perspective. Always.
And if I can link 2 things here, if you think that John Schneider is being, just kind of blowing smoke, saying that he's a top 15 guy for them, if he had been healthy, look at Coach Speak Index Twitter account. It'll be recent if you're watching this in the next day or so, but John Schneider was asked at I guess it was last night's press conference about Jalen Milroe. And someone said, hey, Jalen Milroe said that when you guys met with him, you told him that he was your top quarterback on your board.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And there's this like long pause. And John Schneider said, no.
Oh.
He was not a quarterback on our board, but it was close. So like you said, very much like Chris Ballard, this is a guy who will absolutely speak his mind. So don't think that he's necessarily being, using hyperbole when he's saying that this could have been a top 15 guy.
What's the reliability score on John Schneider?
I don't have them for general managers. I'm just doing them for head coaches because that's like ultimately where the on-field kind of decisions are left. But obviously I do cover the general managers and have a whole, database on Discord basically with everything.
I guess Ballard's probably one, but Schneider is probably not too far off.
Yeah. Yeah.
What did you get on Milroe besides that? That's a great note. Any chance we see him get Taysom Hill usage?
Lot on Milroe in this press conference.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah. So Mike McDonald, well, first of all, John Schneider just said, incredible athlete, very hard worker, just absolutely loved who Jalen Milroe is as a person and as an athlete. Mike McDonald was talking about how their new offensive coordinator, Clint Kubiak, he's going to be able to incorporate the whole roster, what everyone does well, and bringing Jalen Milroe in, that's going to be a part of that. And when Jalen's in the game, we're going to do the stuff that he does great, just like we will when Sam Darnold is leading the charge. Then Mike McDonald says Sam Darnold will take far and away more than 90% of our snaps this year. However, Jalen Milroe deserves and earns the right to go out there, we'll do that. He's basically saying we will play Jalen Milroe in packages this year.
Wow.
I don't think it's going to be enough to be fantasy relevant. If we're looking at 5%, that's like 3 snaps per game on offense. 10% is around 6 or 7 snaps. depending on the pace that the Seahawks play with. But nice that they're already planning to get him out on the field.
One note I had, quote unquote, from Mike McDonald on how he would be used in a Clint Kubiak offense. The athleticism is going to come to life when he's on the field. To me, that's like, hey, if there's any games where Sam Darnold's out, like be really excited from a DFS perspective, where it could be like Justin Fields, where even if he's bad, he's good for fantasy. Cause tons of red flags on Jalen Milroe, a horrific pressure to sack EPA, which are like some of the best, most predictive metrics as red flag stats for quarterbacks. But by rushing fantasy points per game, last year was one of the best years ever. I think only like Jaden Daniels, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts were above him. And then like Kyler Murray right below him. So tons of potential as a runner.
Yeah. Fun guy. And if he can ever figure out the accuracy in the quarterbacking part, then, he'd be a top tier fantasy QB.
You have any good notes on Trey Harris, who went to the Chargers with the 55th overall pick?
I was surprised that they weren't their like typical overflowing with joy and energy selves in this press conference, and especially when talking about Trey Harris, because it seems like a guy that Jim Harbaugh might, stand up and do a backflip in the middle of the press conference for. He did not do that. Just very kind of basic stuff. Joe Ortiz, the general manager, talking about how his intelligence stands out. That's the one thing that stood out about him. Said that he thinks like a quarterback, and of course we know that he was a quarterback in high school. Ortiz called him,
which I hate that. I hate that everyone brings that up. Yeah, he was Malik Neighbors' quarterback 1 year of high school. He was a wide receiver his senior year. He was wide receiver the other 2 years. This isn't a guy. This isn't like Tyler Warren, quarterback all throughout high school, and or RJ Harvey, who was a quarterback his freshman year at college. But I had the same vibe where it's like they said we almost tried trading up for him, but Joe Spanos talked us out of it, and he just like didn't seem that excited. And like when he tried to sell him, like it seemed unconvincing. He was like strong, tough, good route runner, scores the ball a lot, and then Harbaugh tried to list off some stat that he just fumbled it. Yeah. Couldn't remember whatever it was, but yeah.
Yeah, I was definitely hoping for more, because I'm very interested in Trey Harris in fantasy.
Well, it's a great landing spot. I mean, barrier to playing time, it doesn't seem that high to me. Quentin Johnston, I don't think is good. And to me, just like what I think Matt Harmon said, he's probably a sacrificial X. And I see it the same way, in like the sort of vein of a Josh Palmer. So I don't know. I wanted to love Trey Harris like earlier in the offseason, but I ended up being quite negative. So maybe it's just that bias. Next up, Jack Betch, 58th overall to the Raiders. I didn't have a ton of notes on this, but I will just say like this is such a Pete Carroll pick. Like he always falls in love with the guys who have a great story or who have overcome hardship. Like he takes at least one of those guys in every draft. Like, and they don't often pan out. Like Shaq Griffin, like he took the guy who only has one hand. And so Jack Betch, one of the all-time great stories in this draft. Not at all surprising. Any good notes on him?
Pete Carroll just said he's really versatile. He can do everything. He can play outside. He can play inside. Obviously, Carroll talked about how good he is as a blocker, as a run blocker, and how physical he is, how tough he is. He's as tough as you get it as a receiver, Carroll said. And the big quote was, quote, "We'll find his spot for him, but we see him as versatile and we're counting on him to do a number of things," end quote.
Yeah. Didn't mention that he was a tight end his freshman year at LSU, but obviously that plays into the versatility and the blocking. Next up, we have the Broncos. Took my guy, RJ Harvey, at 60th overall, and he took Pat Bryant, 74th overall. I'm going to want to spend a lot of time on both these players. We can start with Harvey. Really one of my guys, my RB5, really one of Brett's guys, his RB3. I have him in so many of my dynasty leagues, and I was doing backflips. It's just like elite landing spot. We've been begging for a competent running back to go there for so long. Javonte Williams, underwhelmed, but the carries were there, the routes were there, and I expect RJ Harvey getting a bigger slice of the pie than we saw from Javonte. It was kind of never the same after a devastating injury. What are your notes on RJ Hart? And this is another guy, Sean Payton, always very forthcoming and honest in his assessment of players.
Yeah, this one they talked about how they love how explosive RJ Harvey is, which we didn't see last year with the Broncos running backs. Same thing with the contact balance in vision. So they're basically looking at, hey, what did we not get last year, and can we find a guy that has these kinds of traits? Talked about obviously his home run ability to go with those explosive runs. The general manager, George Payton, said, we feel like he can improve in the passing game. He wasn't featured there in college. Also said that RJ Harvey can improve his pass protection. I do think this is one of the spots where the pass pro doesn't matter as much. Sean Payton has talked in the past of like, it's not overrated, but it's a little overrated. Like, you just need a guy who can stick in, chip for a second, like just keep the defense honest, right? He doesn't have to make every single block, just enough to keep the defense honest, and then leak out in space if they're pass catching running back. Sean Payton didn't go like super at length about RJ Harvey, but did say, when you look at his running skill set, when you look at his tape, it was just like, wow, explosive runs, all those things, has soft hands. They seem like fairly into him. I mean, he's better than what they have on the roster currently. So like, that's certainly bullish. I do wish they had taken, one of the earlier running backs though.
So I don't, just because I have so much round 2 RJ Harvey, who's now might be going late round 1. No, I think they were high on him. They said, they did trade down twice before making this pick, but it was Harvey the whole way. Sean Payton described falling in love with him the first time he watched film. It was clear Travion Henderson was the running back they wanted. If they didn't have that cornerback there, they would have traded down in round 1 to select him, but he went off the board fairly quickly in round 2. And then I think, RJ Harvey, really the guy. He also waxed poetic on his pass catching upside. And I love to hear this because he kind of framed the argument the same way I did. And JJ Zacharyson, who does an amazing job. His model's great, but we've argued this just because pass catching upside is so important for running backs. We went back and forth in this, and with Kenneth Walker was like, no, I see good pass catching upside for him because he's such a good runner. And that's the most predictive thing, is getting you on the field and being elite at least one thing. And this is literally what he said for RJ Harvey's pass catching upside. It is the very first thing is the eval in the running game. And, he really wows you there. And, it's the same thing as Darren Sproles, who I had, who was not a pass catcher in college, but then became one of the best pass catching running backs ever. And, it started with, you look at the running skill set, which is tremendous. And a lot of times that just projects well. And so they said, there's not a lot on tape of him as a pass catcher, but he was good at his pro day catching the ball, and he's such a good runner and whatnot. That, he seemed pretty bullish. And that's a key point. And I think he could at least do everything Javonte did as a pass catcher. Javonte 12th among running backs in routes run last year. But far and away the biggest takeaway from this presser for me, as much as I love RJ Harvey and was, sitting on the edge of my seat listening to these guys talk about him, is Pat Bryant. And so sometimes it just doesn't do it justice when we talk about it. So you might have to watch this one yourself, but man, Pat Bryant, a player barely on my radar, goes round 3, pick 74th overall, is now a player I'm buying. And he's not going to be expensive at all, which is part of it. But Sean Payton was asked, what did you see from Pat Bryant and where does he fit into your offense? And he immediately comped him to Michael Thomas. And he did not take this lightly at all. He understood the full gravity of such a comp, but that did not slow him down. It was like a good 5-minute rant comparing him favorably to Michael Thomas. Here's the direct quote. Yeah. So look, early on, how does he fit into your offense? Yeah. So look, early on, they come in and they compete in the rotation, but we always talk about who they remind us of. We try to find comps, and there were so many things about his game that reminded me of Michael Thomas. And with all due respect to Mike, who became what he became, you don't ever want to put that pressure on a rookie. We're just talking about the traits, but yeah, he's really explosive off the line of scrimmage, very competitive, very tough. His size, his hands are outstanding. He excelled in crunch time. Obviously, he's physical. So the player comp for me, it reminded me of Mike. It was a lot of the traits that Mike had, especially near the line of scrimmage. He had it at the end. And so, yeah, wow. This is not a BSer. This is a guy you kind of take it at your word. And so last year, he compared Devon Veely to Marquez Colston, but he did it lightly, a lot more lightly than he did Pat Bryant to Michael Thomas. And Veely went in round 7, and Veely played way more than you'd ever expect for a round 7 wide receiver, especially when he went after a Troy Franklin. And so many of my best calls were just like, taking the head coach at their word. I remember Gruden saying, Darren Waller might be our best receiver here. And everyone's like, oh, that's crazy. And then, Darren Waller became like a league winner for me 2 years in a row. I mean, it's still a long shot, especially because this is a player I was not high on. Brett was not high on. He was definitely a reach. But, when you have a coach really high on you with a clear vision for you and talking about one of the most valuable roles in fantasy football history, Michael Thomas holds the record for most receptions in a single season. I expect to be much higher on this player than just about anyone else.
Yeah, don't let anyone tell you that size doesn't matter to women or Sean Payton.
That's right. Yeah. Good size on this player.
6'4", right? 6'3", 6'4". Big dude. We know Sean Payton loves big receivers. He can't stop talking about it. You play that drinking game where anytime he talks about a receiver's size, like you're blackout.
Well, he had Jimmy Graham, he had Marcus Colston, he had Michael Thomas, 6'2.5", 204 pounds, 4.640. Not great. Below average athlete, but good size, like you said.
Yeah, people really slept on the Vele talk last season when Sean Payton was talking him up a little bit in pressers. They're like, this guy's like, what, 26, 27-year-old rookie? Like, he's not going to see the field.
Round 7 pick, played way more than you'd ever expect from a round 7 pick. So, I don't know. Consider me bullish. I think he's going to be super cheap. Like, I'm in a bunch of pre-draft rookie drafts. He's a free agent in all of them. So I'll be spending some fab. Next up, wild pick, another mega reach. Round 3, 70th overall, Lions take Isaac Tesla with a capital S and 2 A's in that Tesla. But here's where it gets crazy. The Lions traded up 32 spots. They gave up 2 round 3 picks. This is basically what the Giants traded up to come into round 1, get that 5th-year option on Jackson Dart. So clearly they love this guy. What sold them on Isaac Tesla here?
You could tell that he made a really big impression on general manager Brad Holmes at the Senior Bowl. Holmes said that he was there. He saw this guy just being a pest, pissing off the defensive backs and defenders. Holmes said, immediately went and looked at his tape. Really loved it. Big, long, smooth strider, can accelerate, can run, hands catcher, play special teams. He can block. He can do a lot of things. Like, this was just a Detroit Lions type of receiver right there, like gritty dude, block his ass off. And when a team makes this kind of move in the draft, like, you really have to take notice of it.
Really good athleticism on him. Brett wasn't the highest on him, but a lot of film guys were. They just saw like rare movement abilities and even flashes, the route running, but like certainly not an analytics darling by any stretch. Not productive in the slightest. He played at Hillsdale College. I honestly thought that was like an online school before transferring. And like Brad Holmes kind of knew he was going to get mocked. And so he went out of his way to take some shots at the analytics guys. He said, height, weight, speed is easy. Stats are easy. A position listed as easy, but film evaluation is the hard thing to figure out. Like he did praise him as a blocker. We know that's huge for the Lions offense. Getting the explosives in the run game, having an elite run game doesn't really translate to fantasy. But I mean, this is good draft capital, 70th overall, and then it's add in 2 extra third round picks. So player they're very high on, even if the rest of us weren't.
Yeah, and Dan Campbell did say a few weeks ago we'd love to bring in some more receiver competition. And Brad Holmes, the day before that, had a press conference. They asked him about picking up Jameson Williams' 5th-year option. He said, we'll probably do it, which they did. But, and I noted this in the Discord, I got the sense watching that press conference that the Lions will not be signing Jameson Williams after that 5th year. Like they know he's going to be somewhere else.
Yeah. Although I did say this was a reach, I should say my friend talked to an AFC South head coach about a week ago who told him he expected Tesla to go somewhere early in round 3. So maybe the NFL was a lot higher on him than everyone else was. This should be another good, important press conference. 83rd overall, only running back to go round 3. Steelers take Caleb Johnson.
Oh yeah, this was a big one, and this was actually Arthur Smith that did
our old friend,
the press conference.
Old enemy, frenemy.
Already,
he's aged gracefully, I have to say. Kyle Pitts struggling, Jonnu Smith breaking out.
Yeah,
history's smiling on Arthur Smith.
He's going to come out on top. He's going to win this Game of Thrones, Arthur. So Arthur Smith in this presser kept talking about, we want to be explosive this year. We want to be explosive this year. And it's kind of intimating that they weren't explosive last year, which, they had Najee, who hasn't broken a 20-yard run ever in his career in the NFL, maybe a few. But he was saying Caleb Johnson is a really explosive running back, one of the more instinctive backs I've watched. He said that he can run in any scheme. I know a lot of people think just an outside zone scheme runner, but Arthur Smith was like, he can work in any scheme. Super fired up to get him in here, and just, we need to get more explosive. This is an explosive runner. But it was very clear in this press conference that they trust him 0% and plan to trust him 0% on third downs and pass blocking downs, passing downs. He was asked how Jaylen Warren and Caleb Johnson can work together, like how the backfield would shape up and look. And he said that just depends on game and where Caleb's at. So, has obviously some development to go. He said one thing Jaylen does, which is extremely valuable, is how much you trust him in protection in those critical possession downs. Doesn't mean a young guy can't do it, but sometimes that can take something off his plate early on, end quote.
Yeah, so I had plenty of the same notes as well. He's not going to get the third. That's Jaylen Warren's role. They mentioned, like you said in your Discord, they mentioned wanting to be more explosive in the running game like 50 times. Yeah. The stat on Najee is that he has 0 career 40+ yard runs in his career, which is a crazy stat for how many carries he has. Another interesting note, not from the presser, is that Aaron Rodgers has been training with DK Metcalf and Caleb Johnson this offseason. A key quote that stood out to me was Arthur Smith saying, quote unquote, really impressive as a volume runner, especially as the game went on. He was a lot better in the fourth quarter, whatever the stat was, 5.0 yards per carry, whatever it is. To me, that seems like, they want him to be the volume back and Warren to kind of stay in his 2-minute drill, pass protection, 33% of the carries role. Arthur Smith later on was asked, do you want the same sort of tandem you had last year? He said, no, it's different. I don't really think like that. But generally every year you get 500 carries, you have 500 carries to divvy it up. And so obviously losing Najee opens things up. They were fifth in backfield carries last year with 437. I think Arthur Smith historically around like 450. But last year, yeah, Najee had 263. Warren had 120. That's sort of how I'd guess it would shake up, is like 66-33 in Caleb's favor. I think he's the presumptive lead back. And it was encouraging to hear they view him as a volume guy who gets better as the game goes on. You want to give him more carries.
Yeah, I am super interested to see how it ends up shaking out, because I do know Tomlin does love Jaylen Warren. Like he's a big fan of Jaylen Warren, and Jaylen Warren is, I mean, he's more of the like Tyler Algier thumper that Arthur Smith had down in Atlanta. You know, remember how much he loved using Algier down there, and Caleb Johnson is more of the like big Najee back that he had last season. I don't know if Jaylen Warren just like sticks where he was. Like he was 2 years ago, he was already starting to get more work, which was, you know, people were clamoring for that for a year or so before it actually happened. But Mike Tomlin, you know, recognizes when a player is playing well, whatever. He did talk about Jaylen Warren's, injury last year, how that hampered his 2024. I think a lot of people will look at Jaylen Warren's 2024 and not necessarily like remember that, you know, it's injury that kind of caused him to flop last year.
So I'm lower on Warren, and you just comped him to Algier, who's 20 pounds heavier. Although BMI, it's probably closer. I was watching one of the Steelers beat reporters talk about this, and they comped Warren to Kenny Gainwell. And I don't know if that's just their vibe or if they like talk to people like an Arthur Smith about this. But I kind of see it that way, where I'm expecting Caleb to be the lead back, and then Warren really pass pro, a little bit of pass catching. That's not Caleb Johnson's game, and change of pace. So I don't know. Maybe I'm more bullish on Caleb Johnson this year than you are, and more pessimistic on Warren.
I mean, there are certainly signs from the presser, like you mentioned, Arthur Smith saying that he's a volume runner, talking about how in the fourth quarter his yards per carry, you know, are very high in the fourth quarter, and that kind of melds with the vision that Arthur Smith has for an offense of using a big back late in the fourth quarter to really wear down defenses. Same kind of philosophy for Mike Tomlin of just running the ball, even if you're not running it that well. They were near the bottom of the league in a lot of those metrics and counting stats and whatever last year. But like you said, they ran the ball like the fourth or fifth most times in the NFL. And then Arthur Smith talking about being explosive, the offense being explosive, how they need that. And then talking about Caleb Johnson being an explosive runner. And there was a thing that really stood out to me in this presser, when Arthur Smith was talking about, hey, you have a running back that's explosive, and basically saying like you run him 3 times, like he's going to break one of those 3 off and you have a first down.
Next up, 87th overall, round 3, Packers take another wide receiver, or maybe a Wildcat quarterback, Savion Williams. What are your notes on Savion? I didn't watch this one.
Yeah, Gutekunst said he's done a lot of the Wildcat running back stuff. He was in love with the size. Like you could tell while he was talking about him, say, oh, he's 6'4", 222 pounds. Played inside in the slot. Gutekunst said he can play outside. He's so good in the red zone. So definitely kind of ears perked up hearing that. Gutekunst said receivers that can do things with the ball in their hands is very important to us, and Savion Williams and Matthew Golden can do that. And then said that we don't look at Savion like a gadget guy. We look at him as a receiver that can do all the things that we ask.
Yeah, maybe this plays into our Matthew Golden pessimism, where we're talking about this like gross wide receiver committee rotation, where like you have packages for Savion, you have packages for someone else. And so he could do like maybe the yak stuff or the short area stuff, even if they don't think he's a gadget. But yeah, another mouth to feed.
Can they just
yeah,
trade Dontavian Wicks already to the Cowboys?
that would be sick. I would like that to happen. Last one for day two. I did not watch this. Vikings 102nd overall took Ty Felton, wide receiver out of Maryland.
I actually did not get to that press conference. That was their, I think, like senior vice president of player personnel or something like that. Did not get to that one. It falls outside the head coach, OC, GM, so it's kind of last place to get to.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, don't see tremendous upside there. Not a player as high end to begin with, but you have Justin Jefferson, maybe the best wide receiver in football. You have Jordan Addison, former round one pick who was great last year. You have TJ Hawkinson at tight end. You have Jalen Naylor, Ascot. So, and they brought in Rondale Moore. So, not expecting much from him year one anyway. So, I think we can kind of skip over him.
Well, two things. One, maybe not the best sign that your head coach or general manager isn't out there talking about you. Right. But Kevin O'Connell did say at the beginning of this month, I think Jalen Naylor is going to have a great year, but we want to make it competitive. We may draft a receiver.
Okay.
They entered the draft with only 4 picks. I don't know if they've made any moves, but I think as of after yesterday, it was just still those 4 picks. So spending one of them on a receiver, there's some significance there.
Okay. Grab bag portion. You have anything from any of the other pressers?
I pretty much weaved them all in. The only other one I didn't mention was Las Vegas. They were asked about whether they had considered quarterback by the end of day 2. The whole Shedeur fall obviously played into that question. John Spytek, the general manager, said that they have, but it hasn't fallen their way with the evaluations that they have. So they're open to drafting a quarterback, but just Shedeur did not rank high enough on the board.
Well, they did end up taking 2 FCS quarterbacks before Quinn Ewers was off the board on day 3. Wow. But yeah, we'll be back to talk about that tomorrow. I don't think we're going to waste too much of your time with some of these, scrubbier names. Really just kind of focus on the key action items, what's most important, most interesting. That's, Basil Tootin to the Jaguars. That's Cam Scatterbo to the Giants and whatnot. So we'll be back tomorrow, the next day, something like that, to break down day 3. Thanks for coming on, Greg. I think this was a blast. I think we did a good job to wrap everything up in an hour. You want to give a plug to Coach Speak Index, one of the most valuable resources in all of fantasy?
Yeah, check us out on Twitter at Coach Speak Index. Definitely need to check out our Discord, Coach Speak Index Discord. If you're playing fantasy football for any amount of money, for any amount of pride, if you're doing any NFL prop betting, anything like that, I put props in the Discord an hour before I put them on Twitter. We moved the market like crazy last year. Same thing with anything I put on Twitter goes into the Discord an hour before. So, get in there and get your information. It's a crazy edge. It's an insane edge, honestly.
I completely agree. Support Greg doing the Lord's work. Super valuable resource. Follow him on Twitter, put notifications on. One of my favorite people in the industry. And thanks for coming on, and we'll see you guys very soon.